you're now, the CEO of Google or Sam Altman at OpenAI or Elon Musk at Grok, and you're looking at the market and you're saying, I want to prioritize either the biggest category or the fastest growing category. And hey, guess what? The answer to those two questions are the same thing. It's programming, right? And I think it's going to be a very interesting question for these tools to say, do I want to prioritize? Hey everyone, Tom Hall here, coming today with another episode of Mortgage Tech Talks. Today I talk about the secret battle going on right now in AI and the biggest AI companies in the world that you're not seeing. It's happening, it's real, it has probably billions, if not trillions of dollars of impact. And of course, it's going to touch every part of AI, this secret battle that I'm talking about. So I break it down. It was a shock to me. I break down exactly what's happening. It's this great report that just came out this week. Exactly what's happening, why it's happening, at least my best guess of it, and what are the implications over the next 2 to 3 years for it. It's an interesting episode for sure. It's maybe a little bit more technical, but I think it's important for everybody who's passionate about AI to understand exactly what's happening at these big companies. If that's interesting to you, we'll see you on the other side. Okay, so I read this report this week and it kind of blew my mind what's going on in AI. And I'm talking about these big AI companies right now, but just, I guess, the industry in general. Something I didn't expect and something I think is going to really kind of shape probably the next at least, call it 2 to 3 years of AI development. And it's really, like I said, kind of blew my mind. So let's get into it. What am I talking about? So before I get too deep into it, I think it is very important to talk about how all these AI companies make money. I mean, Google makes money a bunch of different ways. So does X. OpenAI kind of just is more of the AI product. But in any case, for AI specific products, there's basically 2 ways they make money. The first way is probably the way that everyone here as a mortgage broker is used to, which is subscriptions, right? So you subscribe to ChatGPT, you get access to a bigger model, you subscribe to Super Grok or whatever the X version is, you subscribe to Gemini 3 Pro, you pay a little bit more every month and you get a better model out of that. So that's one. But another way that people don't really know about, and it's, we'll see in a second how important it is using the API. So API is basically application programming interface. It means that I can, as a programmer in my app, whatever I'm using, right? So if I'm developing Blue Mortgage, let's use that as the example, I can use, let's say, OpenAI's API, and I can say, hey, like through code, here's a piece of text, maybe summarize it for me or do something for me, right? And how that works is they charge per token, both input and output tokens. So what is a token, right? Maybe people have heard that word being thrown around. I mean, the most simple way to think about token is it's kind of like a word. It's a series of characters. There's a whole bunch of science of, why we don't just say words and characters, because they aren't really, they are these things called tokens. But that's just, the simple way of thinking about it, which is a token is a word. And there's input and output, right? So if I say, hey, ChatGPT, can you summarize that for me? That whole string that I just said, hey, ChatGPT, can you summarize that for me? There's probably, 20 tokens, something like that. I don't know. And that is an input token. And then, the output, right? Whatever ChatGPT then goes and summarizes those, and every word that it spits out, or every, part of a word, because that's really what a token is also a token. And so these, when you use the API, it charges per token. So every time if you have a small paragraph, they'll charge you less. If you have a big paragraph, they'll charge you more. And if they send back a very big paragraph, again, they'll charge you more versus if they send back just a smaller paragraph, whatever. So long story short, that's the 2 ways these models make money. That's important. We're going to get back to that in just a second. So what the article I was looking at this week goes into, and let me share my screen here now. It talks about token usage, right? So again, tokens are those kind of words. So if you look down here, kind of October of 2024, I couldn't believe this. So it was right around, 500, is that million? Okay, that seems, billion. Seems like a lot of tokens, right? So 500 billion times a word has been sent, and so 500 billion words have been exchanged. That was it in October of 2024. But if you fast forward to now November, and I don't even think this is per month, I think it's more than that. But if you fast forward to today, that number is over 7 trillion. So 7 trillion in this past month. I think it's maybe half a month. I should really know what these bars are. But order of magnitude is we've went 14x over the past year, the number of words that are exchanged, either given or received from a model, one of these LLMs has 14 times, right? That is crazy. And that's, again, both through the API and, just chatting with these different bots through more of the consumer interface. But the tokens have gone 14 times X. So that's pretty crazy. That's pretty cool. So the important question to ask is why? What's kind of driving this? So you go a little bit further down the report and you get to this, the anatomy of the prompt, starting with this one here is prompt tokens, right? So I was kind of saying input, output. You could also talk about it as prompt completion, right? So that's another kind of way to say it. So the number of tokens, the number of words that are used to ask one of these LLM models has gone up 4 times. Right? So again, this is even just from the beginning of the year, actually. So it's not even a full year. We've gone up 4 times. And then the output or the completion, as they put it here, that's the second graph. It's gone up 3 times, right? So how people are typing in has gone up 4 times. And what ChatGPT or whatever else, Grok, you name it, Gemini is spitting back has gone up 3 times. And I just want to kind of take a quick step back because when I read this again, I'm scrolling through, I'm saying, does that seem right? Like, are the, I guess, paragraphs that I'm writing to ChatGPT and Grok and all these other ones 4 times longer? Like, are my prompts really 4 times longer? I don't think so, right? I didn't think so. That didn't seem right to me. That didn't really pass the sniff test for me. And I don't know if people see, I think they've gotten a bit longer, maybe twice as long, because I kind of know what to say and the things say, hey, do this, don't do this. I got a little bit smarter of how to ask them, but it's not 4 times. But that question was kind of, or I guess my concern was somewhat answered when I scrolled to the next one. And this is kind of the, I guess, punchline or starting to get to the punchline of the whole, I guess, episode here is that if you look, it says average number of tokens used, and it's all these different colors of lines. If you're not seeing it here, there's about maybe I'll call it 10 different ways the tokens are used, right? Things like academia, finance, health, legal, marketing, programming, role play, science, technology, translation, trivia. So there's actually 11. And you see all these different lines over time. And most of them are kind of near the bottom of the chart and they just kind of are flat, right? So a simple example is health. It's the pink one there. And it kind of it's around 5,000 beginning of the year. And now it's around 5,000. So that hasn't changed at all, huh? But there's one line that is sticking out far, far above the rest. And you can pause the video here if you want to try to guess, or if you're already seeing the screen share, you already know, which is programming. Okay, so program. So we'll talk about what programming actually is in just a second, but programming's line is above the rest, A, and B, it's the one driving all the growth. You can see that for programming, it very much so is. It's at least doubled, maybe tripled that line, which is programming. And this is average number of tokens used, right? So programming is this thing that is driving really the increase in number of tokens used. Huh. So that's interesting to see. Um, so I'll pause there for just a second because I think it's worth explaining, worth diving into just a little bit more what we mean by programming. Because again, for you as a mortgage broker, maybe it's a little bit more foreign when you mean programming. Literally what programming is coding, right? So literally, all those nerdy guys, engineers out there who are sitting at their laptops and, guys and gals, sure. And I'm one of them. So no judgment or anything like that. Sitting at their computer, opening up, their coding laptop and typing in code. That usage is driving all of that growth, right? Just about all that growth. The increase in number of tokens used per prompt is almost entirely based on these programmers. So what does it mean? It means, a lot of how it's used is not even the programmer asking specific questions, open up ChatGPT and asking questions. It's baked into the IDE. So I'm getting a bit technical here, but IDE is just the tool they use. It's like Word, right? They open it up and they start writing in programming. It's baked into it. So when the programmer opens up their IDE, which is kind of like, again, that Word doc and starts actually coding, a lot of these IDEs, like these Word docs, are automatically have AI integrated with it, and they're sending APIs. We talked about that earlier, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth at ChatGPT. And they're adding more and more context. They're giving a lot more information, right? They're telling ChatGPT a lot more, 3 times as much. And they're getting back a lot more, right? They're saying, hey, and in your response, please give me very detailed answers. So that back and forth, kind of behind the scenes, even, right? Programmers aren't, again, like I said, in ChatGPT having a nice conversation. It's just right embedded right within the workflow, and the context, the size of the prompts that are being sent kind of through the back end, and then what's being received has been exploding. It's going up and up and up. So it's a bit technical, but right, I guess it kind of squares a circle of, okay, why is programming driving so much of this growth? It's because it's kind of all behind the scenes. It's not that someone's sitting there and typing in. It's that the tools that programmers use are interacting, already talking to ChatGPT, already talking to Gemini, they're already talking to Grok, and they're getting more and more and more sophisticated. So that's what I'm seeing here. Um, is this one here that says basically since May, so over 6 months, not even that much, 11% of all tokens were programming, and now 50%, right? So in the past, like I said, just about 6 months, it's not very long. In that time period, programming and these tools that I'm talking about that are going back and forth with ChatGPT gone from 11% of all usage to 50%, right? So half, literally half of everything that ChatGPT and again, all these different tools, Gemini, you name it, is doing is just talking to these programmers and these programming tools to give it better answers and help the programmers program, right? These coders code. Um, and yeah, so that's very interesting. And then what's even more interesting, I think, is that if you look at the market share, right, of that category of programming, Anthropic dominates. And like half the people here, raise your hand if you've even heard of Anthropic. It's not really in the mainstream. They have Claude, and maybe you've heard of Claude, but you kind of don't hear it. It's kind of like, oh, you hear about ChatGPT, maybe you hear about Gemini more. Maybe if you're on X, you hear about Grok. You don't really hear about Anthropic, but they own literally 60%. They dominate the market, 60%, which is of a category, which is 50% of all AI. So literally Anthropic, just in their share of programming, owns, if you kind of combine those things, 30% of the market. Anthropic owns 30%, 1/3 of the entire AI market, and almost entirely because of programming. So it's pretty cool, right? I mean, and this is kind of the hidden battle that I'm talking about here. And so this is what blew my mind. And so I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, Anthropic's dominating. Google has like maybe, so if Anthropic's 60%, Google's the next in line at like maybe 10. It's hard to say in these graphs. OpenAI is a distant third. They're maybe 5, probably less. And then X and, a bunch of these open source models are just a long tail of nothingness. So yeah, if you can't see that chart, if you're looking on the screen though, that yellow is Anthropic, green is Google, red is OpenAI, and then yeah, it's just all this random crap. Brown is X that was big for a while, and now it's become less and less. And so this is such an important battle, right? It's the biggest category, right? It's literally 50% of all AI usage, and it's the fastest growing, right? And I think this is so important. And now you as a mortgage broker, like, Tom, why did you take me on this journey? I don't care about developers and I don't care about this. I just want to open up my ChatGPT and ask it questions. That's fine, but I think it's important to understand this, because if you're now, the CEO of Google or Sam Altman at OpenAI or Elon Musk at Grok, and you're looking at the market and you're saying, I want to prioritize either the biggest category or the fastest growing category. And hey, guess what? The answer to those two questions are the same thing. It's programming, right? And I think it's going to be a very interesting question for these tools to say, do I want to prioritize this? Because like we just talked about, it's such a huge category, but for everyone here listening, it's not even that relevant. And so what battle are you fighting here, right? Are you going to be the one who everyone knows and talks about, and it's like ChatGPT right now? That's, if you think AI, you think ChatGPT, and you want to win the mindshare competition by dominating the consumer market, which is obviously smaller than the programmer market? Or do you want to dominate the fast growing, biggest, thing in the whole AI space. And I think companies are going to have to specialize. They're going to have to choose, right? I don't think, this is just my personal opinion now, you can be amazing at both. I think the needs of a programmer and the needs just from like a pure LLM, how you train these LLMs and how you do reinforcement learning and all these different tools that these big companies use to make these big models are fundamentally different when you're serving a consumer and you're serving a programmer. And so, yeah, I think the next run, the next version of ChatGPT, Sam Altman's got a big decision ahead of him. He's saying, do I want to make this, I want to continue dominating consumers and do that? Or do I want to start investing in this fast growing, huge market, which is programming? And so I think ultimately what it means, again, for us as consumers is there might be trade-offs made, right? It might be, hey, my favorite tool used to be Gemini, but now they've gone all in on programming and now I can't really use it, or, pick any of those other tools. So I think it'll be interesting. So I'll leave it at that. I mean, this was a pretty technical episode, but it is something that crossed my mind and I thought it was interesting. I think really the punchline of this all is that, companies are going to have to choose. Right? Do Google, OpenAI, XI want to lean into what they're already good at, which is distribution, right? Google, you're using Gmail. XAI, you're already using Twitter, X, whatever. OpenAI, you're already using ChatGPT. But it's a crowded space, right? And so for those three companies, they want to look at each other and say, hey, let's all fight this out and try and win the consumer. Or do they look over at the programming market and saying this one company, Anthropic, is literally dominating? And should we just abandon the consumer and just try to go head to head with Anthropic and try to win, 50% of all AI usage, which is programmers? I think it's an interesting thing. I mean, there's also a whole other implication which will go down, which is, hey, what are the economic impacts of AI? And we're seeing now a lot of it just has to do with computer programming, but we'll leave that for now. I think it's ultimately going to shape, like I said, though, the next 2 or 3 years. And I think what we'll see, my bold prediction, and you can bookmark this, is that at least one of those three, either Google, probably not Google, maybe OpenAI, maybe X, will say, I'm going to forget about the consumer and I'm going hard after the programming market. I'm going to try and eat up some of that share of the fastest growing, biggest market in all of AI. We'll see. We'll see how it goes, but I'll leave it at that. And thanks everyone again so much for your support. If you have any comments, of course, leave it below, and we'll see you next week.